So aloha everyone and mahalo everyone for joining us to this presentation today. It's our privilege to introduce you to Emily Cadiz. She's a dedicated advocate for community-driven marine conservation and traditional ecological knowledge. She embodies the belief that our degree should serve our communities, and her journey from earning her master's in science in the NREM program here to build a fulfilling career in community-based resource management and education on Kauai is an inspiring testimony to her communities. In 2017, Emily completed her master thesis focusing on facilitating a community-driven marine monitoring program in Haena, Kauai. And a wise mentor once told Cadiz our degree should serve our communities, and her work was instrumental in supporting the Haena community efforts to become the first community-based subsistence fishing area in Hawaii. Her experience, including her travels between Oahu and Haena during her studies, eventually led her to make Hawaii her permanent home, where she passionately contributes to the nonprofit organizations she has built close relationships with.
And one of Emily's guiding principles is that knowledge should be shared and benefit the communities that it serves. And that philosophy has led her to become the community program director at Hui Maka Inana Makana for the past 9 years since she graduated from here. And she's dedicated those 9 years to building capacity based on community visions of Aina Momana. And her commitment to collaboration and fostering connections through Aina is at the heart of her impactful work. Emily's story is a great example of how education and dedication can be harnessed to empower and uplift communities. So welcome, Emily. Thank you for being here.
Mahalo for that beautiful introduction. Wow, I didn't realize that was, I don't think I sent them that. That was really, really beautiful. Thank you guys. Those are the arrows.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay. So aloha, I'm Emily. I think they gave a pretty great introduction. I was sitting in your shoes in 14, 15, 16, 17. So it's really funny and to be back here walking the hallways. When you guys hit that time, you'll feel it. I don't know how to explain it. One of the teachers I ran into, she was like, all the stress and the trauma. And I'm like, no, I mean, you'll probably feel a little bit of that, but it's mostly just like, wow, you've come a long way from where you were not too long ago here. So thank you all, and it's good to see you guys, and good to see old professors, Melissa and Milwaukee. Good to see you guys. Mahalo for having me. Okay, I'm gonna jump right into it. So how many of you guys, by the show of hands, are from the communities that you guys work in? Anybody? The places that you're currently doing your studies on, you guys are from there. Awesome. Couple hands. So. How many of you guys are not from the places that you guys are currently working in? Okay, that's fine. So I'm not from Haena, if that wasn't shared at the beginning. I'm from Oahu, Mililani girl, born and raised on Oahu. And I was introduced to this nonprofit during my undergraduate studies. And so today what I'm going to be sharing with you guys is mostly my journey. I'll have bits and pieces of my thesis in here, but I always say, just go read the paper if you guys want to know more about the thesis, but this is more so, I was really excited when Melissa reached out because it was really about bringing alumni in to share the journey, and I think that's really relevant for you guys right now as you are, I'm sure, in the thick of it. So I went to UH Hilo for marine biology. That was what my undergrad studies were. Loved Hilo, loved the Big Island, loved my professors there, but definitely butt heads with them a little bit in a good way, in a challenging way. Little did I know they were getting me ready for grad school. But let's just say that the conversations when I was in my undergrad, they weren't community based in the marine science department at UH-Hilo. It was very community is there, we're here doing our study sites, and that never rang well with me in our study places. I didn't understand why we weren't communicating with the community or letting them know what kind of research we were doing in the area, or even just getting some insight and guidance. And I used to like have these little discussions with my teachers, and I'd have presentations that gave cultural context and history to the place that we were studying, and they would tell me, why is that in your presentation? That shouldn't be in there. You should just get to the information, the data, your research questions, all of that. And so that always was kind of challenging for me. And then during a class trip in my last year of my college at UH-Hilo, we took a trip to Ha'ena, Kauai, and my professors Pilika Andrade and Dr. Misaki Takabayashi. It was a class called Ku'ula, which is a really great mo'olelo about fishing and fish aggregations. But it was about a class that brought traditional and Western knowledge systems and kind of how we integrate that. And that class was pretty life-changing, especially for a lot of us local students that were really puzzled by kind of what our gut was telling us and these values that we grew up with kind of the research world that we were involved in. And the door just opened wide. We had a camping trip in Ha'ena during spring break, met Uncle Pes, the Hui Makaina no Makana, who I'm with today. And for an Oahu girl who grew up in the suburbs, a lot of the work was on the outskirts of Oahu, yeah, in the deep country. That's where a lot of like cultural practices still felt very alive. So when I came to Kauai, I was like, oh my God, it's not happening in a book anymore. It's real time right here. They're doing it all. And by then I was already knowing that I wanted to study fisheries management, but more specifically community fisheries management. And thanks to Mehana, she was kind of the only professor at the time that I had heard about that was really diving into that work. And so that was what brought me here. I'm a pretty ambitious go-getter. If I want to do something, I'm gonna just push myself all the way to do it. And so shortly after I graduated, I knew that I wanted to get my master's. I had already reached out to Mehana to do NREM. And she was the one that encouraged me and said, hey, if you have this whole summer before you start school in August, why don't you come to Kauai, start to figure out what you want to do and dive into your project already this summer. And so I don't know if you guys have heard of the Pipes internship program. I did the Pipes internship program. That was my 3rd or 4th year with them. So by that time I got to kind of talk to my mentors in the Pipes internship and build my own project. And so that allowed me the freedom to do the internship, but start to build my thesis, which was going to be the community-driven marine monitoring program for the Ha'ena community. Well, that I didn't know right off the bat. And so that journey, so I lived on Kauai. I was living at Limahuli Gardens during the summer. And then when school started, I moved back home to Oahu. And then that sparked my graduate work of getting to know the community, what were they interested in, what was kind of their focus. And then took off with my project. I realized that a lot of the families there were really face-to-face people, and that was kind of something important for me. Coming from Oahu, a lot of like just my own perception was a lot of things can be done via email, people respond to emails. Kauai, a little bit different. You gotta go to auntie and uncle's house, you gotta sit, talk story. It wasn't as like that. And so on my own dollar, I took 30+ trips to Kauai back and forth 1 weekend a month just to continue relationships with the community after working with them for a whole summer. They had community work days twice a month, and I just wanted to make sure I was at everyone to maintain momentum and just keep relationships because they had become family for me. So this is just a quick snapshot of like what life could kind of look like for me going back and forth to 2 different places. For those of you that don't know where Kauai is, or Ha'ena, we're on Kauai and we're on the northwest shore. So past Hanalei, literally to the end of the road. Degree should be for community. So Pilika Andrade, one of my mentors and the one that introduced us to the hui, she said this line when I was in my undergrad, and it's always stuck with me. I thought it's a very powerful tool because that's what it should be. We all sitting in this room are a powerful resource for whatever we're studying. And if we can use to turn it for something positive, for something that we look behind us and there's a greater thing going on where we're actually contributing something to a Lahui movement, to something that just benefits all, then that's really what it should be. And so that's kind of been that was the motivation for my degree, is that this degree was really a master's for the hui, but they're already masters of the work that they do. But this is kind of the story of how that came to be. Okay, so I'm gonna read you guys a little story real fast. Pilina, relationships and values. Who are you? Where are you from? Trying to answer all her questions, but she cuts me off so she can talk. Do you have a sickle? She asks. No, but I can go get one, I eagerly reply. Go get one then. I sprint up the hill to Limahuli Gardens. Out of breath, I yell, Kavika, I need a sickle. I just met an auntie down at the Lo'i and she wants me to get a sickle. Kavika laughs, tells me to grab one and make sure to bring it back. I sprint down the hill and clumsily step into the Lo'i that she is already working in. Just before my foot touches the mud, she yells, no, 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 no. I don't need help in here. You go to that one down there. She points to the Lo'i at the polar opposite end of Hui Makainano Makana curatorship property. I reach the Lo'i that has pukamoy, which is a type of weed, as tall as me. I take a big gulp and begin working. Hours go by in the hot summer sun. I look over at her every once in a while and she is still working. No water breaks, no snack breaks. I try to keep up, keep going, and going to what feels like 5 hours, but was probably only 2 hours. Finally, I'm hanging by a thread, dehydrated and tummy growling as she walks over to me laughing. Okay, stop already. You work too hard. Call for the day. Later on the next day, my advisor picks me up for a check-in meeting. How's it going so far? She asks. Well, I met one of the aunties yesterday. She worked me hard in the Lo'i, I reply with exhaustion. What? You worked with auntie in the taro patch? That must mean she really likes you because that never happens. Apparently the first community member I met is by far the toughest one out there. So I have a lot of these vignettes in my, so by the way, I didn't reread this until today and I was like, God, this is way better than my presentation. So I have these in my thesis, but I really appreciate Mehana, and this is one of my pieces of advice to you guys too. If there's room to, even in just your journal, write about your journey because you are a living test and tool of your own research. What you feel and what you experience throughout the journey is part of it. It's part of the growth. It's absolutely necessary and important. And it'll make you enjoy your project more, I would say. So that was my introduction to relationships. Where do relationships begin? Pilina. Pilina is the word that we use for relationships. Pili means to stick close together, and na is kind of that action of relationships. And when you think about things that stick close together, like we have relationships to everything, but we're talking about that close, nurtured kind of relationship. And so that's why that was the foundation of the thesis, was how do relationships drive the work that we do? And also learning about the relationships that this community has to their place. So this inspired a huge portion of my thesis. I stared at this map for hours, blown away. I don't know if you guys have ever seen something like this. I always say this every time I bring up this map, but I have never personally seen a community or a place I've seen it of mountains and ridges, but I've never seen it of reefs. And this inspired the work of our marine monitoring program, was that not only is this documented, but the fact that you have community members that have this in-depth knowledge of their places. And I always say, when you look at this and you think about fishing, it's not only knowing, it's like the grocery store. It's not only knowing which grocery store to go to, but which aisle to go to for which food item you're looking for. And that's what this community, that's how strong their relationships are to their place and how strong their knowledge is of their place. So when I first met the community, they were working towards their community-based subsistence fishing area. It's got a long history and a long story. But right there is the quote, it's to support the consumptive needs of the Ha'ena people. Ha'ena is the first in the state of Hawaii to have this designation. It's a step towards coal management. It's a step towards, some say it's a step towards traditional resource management of a community really taking care of their place-based management. And so a grad student, right? We all go in as grad students thinking, well, this is my project, these are my deadlines, and this is what it's gonna look like. Nope. With my project, I had to push all that aside and just work with the community, build relationships, get to know them, so that I could really make sure that the degree was for the community and the project was so aligned with what they wanted and what they were trying to do. And so this is what they were working towards. And what I had gained from a summer of doing talk stories is that the community really needed a monitoring program. They were strong in their policy. They were strong in a lot of other places, but the state was demanding, how are you going to prove scientifically that your data and your fisheries will improve? How are you going to show all of this? And so that's what they were like, we need help with that. So my graduate research then, in short, is to assist in establishing a community-driven marine monitoring program that supports the Ha'ena community's goals towards being self-reliant stewards of their place. And I looked at that through the role of relationships and building capacity, understanding the seasons and productivity of Ha'ena, integrate different knowledge systems and tools, and giving lessons in community-based resource management. Okay, so now we step into the next thing, Malama. So how I like to talk about Malama is the way my mentor, Piligo, who I keep bringing up, she's the one in the purple pareo. She told us, if you break up the word Malama, if you take away Mala is a garden. If you think about relationships, and then you think about a garden, how do you tend relationships? And the way you tend relationships will be based on your relationship to it, right? And so if you think about a garden, if you think about all the things in your life that you have a close relationship to, what do you need to do to feed it and to be able to harvest from it, right? What do you need to do to take care of it? It needs sun, it needs water, you need to remove the weeds, it requires constant interaction. So if we think about Malama in that sense, how do we tend and take care, and how do relationships drive that? And so a lot of it was talk stories. But when I was doing my thesis study, you know, for us, a lot of us local kids, it's a no-brainer that community should be a part of the process. But luckily I found scientific literature that mirrored that, which is basically what was called at the time community-based participatory research, where the community is involved in the problem identification, the project development, data collection, data analysis, dissemination of results, and implementation for recommendations. So that is how I approached this whole project. The community, we had focus groups, talk story sessions to really build priority areas, priority species to focus on, and engage our local school systems in the area to be a part of the marine monitoring program, because that's the resources that we're able to. I'm not gonna read my Malama story, is a little bit longer, but basically the tough lesson was one day, I had kind of like a conflicting day. I'm sure some of you might have had it, where I'm at my site and I should be monitoring, but the swells were big. It was a community work day, and I wanted to join the community work day because it's about being with the community, but I felt my committee in the back of my head, like, you gotta do the data, where's your data. And so I jumped in the water and tried to do a fish survey on my own. And the swells were huge. Next thing I knew, I was getting sucked out with 6-foot swells dropping on my head and a channel pulling me out. And I thought I was done. I'm not even kidding. I thought I was like, you're gonna die for your master's work, you know? And I realized in that moment that that's not what I was there to do. I wasn't supposed to be a grad student snorkeling by myself for this monitoring program. It was about the community. The community it's a collective community doing the monitoring. It's not send the grad student out to do it. It's about all of us doing it together. And so luckily I got myself out. I threw myself onto the reef. A lifeguard was like halfway out already to grab me, and I was just there. And then he brought me in, and drove me over to the community work day where everybody was just carrying on with their day, weed whacking, working in the lo'i, and told them what happened. And they were just like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. And when I came out of the ocean, there was no swimming signs all over the beach. Little did I know, because I went in through an access point that didn't have the sign. And it was then that I realized, are you using the tools and the lessons properly to make sure that you are doing the project, like besides what you think should be happening or what the influence is, what is the essence of what the project is about? So that was my little journey through that lesson. And so this is what we ended up doing when I say Malama. We put together a toolkit, a marine monitoring toolkit that used different tools, that some which already exist and some that we brought in. Huli'ia is a holistic observation looking at trends and cycles from Malka to Makai. We have the lovely Cassie in here from Lima Huli Gardens. I used to sit down with Lima Huli Gardens once a month and get Malka observations of plants that are flowering, fruiting, seeding. I would sit down with the lifeguards monthly to hear what their observations were of the ocean. And I'd sit with our community members at the lo'i to discuss what they were seeing from the fishermen and Levita and farmer perspective. And that's what Huli'ia is. It's this discussion piece of observations from Malka to Makai with different users through their lens, right? A fisherman will see things different than a farmer will see things different than a botanist, but all are important. And this was the method that the community chose as the most, the one that they favored the best. Imukai is a traditional practice in Ha'ena. There's a grad student working on that right now as well. And it's fish houses that were used to trap and feed the community. Holo logs is something that myself and Kavika Winter developed. We noticed that this community was predominantly a throw net community, fishermen. If you guys saw the reefs, there are a lot of reef flats, so throw net was the predominant thing. And so we thought about how can we do fish surveys without, I remember one day snorkeling and trying to do a fish survey, and some of the uncles were looking at me like, what are you doing, girl? I was like, I'm doing my fish survey. He's just like, you chasing away all the fish. And little did I know, like, talk about being in the room with the experts. They were like, come, sit me on a rock with them, show me the way. And they're like, we can tell you exactly what fish you're looking for, what size, and how many of them, just from our spots, from our kilo spots over here. Same information, different approaches, right? So we developed holo logs based on a throw net fisherman perspective of how to catch fish. Gonad kit was something that Eva Shemo was doing, which was looking at spawning seasons of fish and their gonads. Limu monitoring, we experimented a bunch. That was another fun one. Taking quadrats out on the reef at a reef that just sweeps. It's just not doable at that kind of place. So we really learned and weeded and went through all the different marine monitoring methods that we could use that fit best for this place. And then OPE surveys, which has also evolved quite a bit over time. Okay. Aina Momona. So Aina Momona, if we think about Aina is the word, it's all the things that feed us. Aina is not just land. Aina is everything that feeds you physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And Momona is that fat, juicy, thriving, productive. And the way I like to talk about Aina Momona is you build it till it overflows. I see a glass overflowing. I see food. When you guys see fruits or certain foods that are just ripe and dripping juicy on the outside, like that is Momona, when it's just thriving in productive communities. And so what are we up to today? So when I finished my master's thesis, I defended and I moved to Kauai. At the time, the nonprofit Hui Makaina no Makana, they did not have any staff. It was all volunteer and a board. And just through time and being really, when I was working with them through my thesis, I would help them with school groups, I would help them with anything. Because really, when you go to a place, you kind of defer to working with the people and what they want to do. And so, like I said, a lot of times my trips over, I would have the mindset, oh, I'm gonna accomplish this, I'm gonna get this out of the way. And I would leave feeling like, oh, I didn't do that, but I actually did so much more because I allowed myself to fully be alongside the community and realizing every time that's part of the process, that's part of the program, that's what this is all about. And so I moved to Kauai, and after that, the community said, hey, we don't have funding, but if you write grants or try to look for funding, then like we would love to have you. And so I partnered with another organization that taught me how to do grant writing, started writing my own grants to keep myself working here part-time, full-time. And now here we are today, 9 years later, and they finally have a staff of 7 of us all together. And I'm in a shared position. That's why at the beginning of my presentation, I am shared between 3 nonprofits doing education for the Ha'ena community and other parts of Kauai. And so that is my Aina Momona. Just to get into like some of the other things, just if you guys want to hear some results from the thesis and the ongoing work that we're doing. So like I said, in the monitoring, when I did my thesis, I had the community vote which of the monitoring methods they think that they could carry out without a grad student, without anybody involved, without funding. What is something they think they could continue? And Kuli'ia was voted the one that they think they could do. But really, like I said, it wasn't about the data, yeah? We're experimenting different methods for community based on place and what can and can't go in that place. And really what we came out with was it's really about a toolkit of feasibility. The importance of needing partnerships to support and carry out marine monitoring efforts, the need for experience and capacity to collect and analyze data, the need for a dedicated paid position to facilitate and organize these collective efforts. It's easily a full-time job. And a lot of these communities that we work in, or some of us, it's just, they lean on grad students or they lean on interns, right, to come in and do this type of work because community members are probably volunteering their time because they already have full-time jobs. And they just don't have that level of experience that us young guys coming out of education can provide. And the importance of collaboration with places like Limahuli Gardens, to build positions such as the one that I'm in to expand more on resources, research, and education for the entire office. Our impacts on our education programs since the transition over, Ha'ena has had a long history of education programs, even from long before I stepped in. Lei Wan, who's the director of Limahuli Gardens, has been doing education there since she was young, and many of others were family to that place. So really, I'm just building upon what already exists. And so we've had a lot of hands-on education programs. We have internships. We just finished a biocultural internship with and brought those interns to the Hawaii Conservation Conference. We've had resource management workshops, employment opportunities, and local and international exchanges. We've taken our local Ha'ena kids in one of the photos on that white coral road. You'll see over here, we've taken our Ha'ena families all the way to the Cook Islands to do an exchange with their fisheries, which looks very similar. And a lot of here too, our internships focus on making sure that priority targets are Ha'ena families and our kids from that place. Another important thing that has been through this journey is the impacts of community engagement. It's really about an invested effort dedicated to community engagement. As you guys can see, it's not everybody that's gonna do this, but it's definitely my passion and where I see the most value in. And what we've learned through time through our education programs is that education programs have been the heartbeat of community engagement. Through consistent programs that focus on our youth, trust is built. Sometimes there's community dynamics are messy, as I was talking earlier with Dr. Kaviko Winter, who's been involved in that community for a very long time himself. It has its trials and tribulations. There's generational issues between families. I'm sure everybody can attest to knowing those kind of things. But I think too, when you work with the youth, it forces families to work together. And that's what I learned is kind of the key to community engagement is working with the kids, and the families will start to show up and the families will start to get along, right? It's all about the keiki and kupuna. When you really nurture those relationships, families kind of put their problems aside to really, they want their kids to be involved in these things. And so that's been a really big highlight. Another thing is that community engagement is a measure of success for us. We still struggle on how to present that type of data, but 8+ years of our Nakilo Aina programs and 20+ years of the Hui being established. They were established in 1998, and so you think 2 community work days a month and their involvement with just the Ha'ena State Park, if anybody's been up to date with that. The community has always been at the forefront of a lot of their movements and things, and so this community is always heavy in community engagement. And this was a little survey that we did at our very first Nakilo Aina program, summer program. It was a 5-day program overnight. And it was kind of the culmination of my thesis, and we got some feedback from the families about what was the most important thing from them. We had 92 families joining us camping for those days. And we had families saying, oh, we enjoyed coming together, learning about the place and the resources, Pilina, making new friends, getting to Launa, hang out together, a knowledge exchange. So we always say, really, that's Aina Momona, right? If we just focus on just teaching them about the resources and the biology of things, that's really just one piece of the pie. If we make sure that relationships are being met and getting to know each other and building and teaching them new things and just sharing space together, you can learn a lot from sharing space with people overnight. We learned that that's really what it's all about, is all these pieces make Aina Momona. They make the whole, this is what makes thriving and abundant communities, is this kind of all the pieces. And so that's kind of a review of this was the framework for my thesis. So like I mentioned, Pilino is about relationships, Malama. If you go and read the thesis, it'll dive more into the monitoring methods, and you can read more about that. And then Aina Momona as kind of that long-term vision that we're all hoping for. And what was really cool is after my thesis and presenting this type of framework, the community ended up using it as the framework for their strategic planning. Last year, we just went into what's our 5 to 10 year plan. And this is what ended up being the model for the framework for the next 5 to 10 years. Like I said, at the bottom is the relationships or the key values that the community said is always at the base and the foundation of everything they do. Malama is some of the targeted activities that they'd like to start doing. And Aina Momona is kind of those long-term visions of measures of success for us. So some key takeaways from my thesis in itself. Building relationships, which leads to trust, which leads to capacity. Identifying the values and relationships of your community. Every community is different. Some communities don't value the same things as others, that's fine. But finding out what that is will help you tremendously in your work, and also to help you communicate your work. Relationships, of course, I will say that again and again, that word at the foundation and the forefront. Community empowerment, when you let them be a part of the process, there's so much strength and power to that. And that's what I talk about when I say degrees for communities, is when you involve them in the process, you can really look back and feel like all these people agree to this because they stood by it and they were along every step of the way. Look holistic, not selective. Social and cultural, not just biophysical health. Inclusive and not exclusive. Partnerships allow for different ways of knowing, which is important. Multiple perspectives is always a good thing. And the importance of place-based work. And one of my favorite quotes, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And that's kind of, you know, some are willing to do that, not all. Some just want to get in and get out, and that's fine. And I always say, because we created a research protocol now when people want to do research in Ha'ena, grad students and folks got to submit a little proposal about what they're looking for. And some are just like, hey, I'm just here to do a few interviews and I'm out. Okay. But we ask that you at least come to a community work day to introduce yourself. And we ask that you know, we want relationships. Like I said, Pilina is the foundation. And so when you meet those kind of people, you got to honor that. And if you're there for that, then hang. But if you're not there for that, then maybe it's not the right fit for you. And then last but not least, I just wanted to share Pili Kino, which is like the thing, Kino is your body or yourself, and how to malama yourself. I'm sure all of you guys are, I don't know, first year, second year, third year in the grad school journey. And so those were the last slide was lessons learned from the overall thesis. This is kind of lessons learned just personally. I don't know about you guys, but grad school is also during the time of some of my biggest personal hurdles in life. Somehow those seem to just find each other right at the same time of your academic journey and just heighten, yeah? And so these are my advice to you. I know, like I said, is all the things that feed you physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. You need to make sure that you honor that, and you need to make sure that you recognize that you're an Aina, yeah? The places that you're studying are an Aina, but you are too. And you need to be fed and to be able to do the work you do. I always say you're the va'a to your own work. You're the best. Listen to your na'au, as you guys could hear in my stories. There were times where I was really against something. There were times even when I was against things that my committee had to say. That was scary, right? You're like, how do we have a healthy, constructive relationship and conversation with your committee when you might not agree on the same things? But allow yourself to have those open conversations with them. Don't hide that. And I think they would appreciate that too, yeah, just that open dialogue. But listen to your na'au. And if it doesn't feel right, lean into it. There's a reason why it doesn't feel right. Listen to that. My other friend too just told me, listen to your na'au, but do your homework. I like that too. And then surround yourself in community, places and spaces that feed you, and honor your story and your journey in this process. Like I said, write down. You know, you dedicate 3+ years to this process. You might as well, you know, really find the pieces that you love. I have to say my cohort really saved me from a lot of rough days. I'm sure you guys have the same thing. But just really honor your story, honor your journey, because you are a living tool that's you're not separate from your graduate work. You're constantly in interaction with it, and that's how it should be. You should be in a relationship with it. So honoring your journey and your story through it is super important. And I'll close with my last Aina Momona story. Amidst all the craziness at our Nakilo Aina camp, I take a quiet moment by myself. I look around and see over 92 people at the camp. Almost all of the 30 original Ha'ena families represented, as well as families from south, west, and east side of Hawaii, and our extended families and partnerships across the state of Hawaii. Kids are laughing and running around. Families are conversing and enjoying each other's company. The rain and mud here has us all huddled under one big tent together, which brings a nice element to our camp. I feel an overwhelming sense of warmth, not from the campfire, but a warmth from the inside of my body. All that hard work has paid off for this very moment. 3 years of building relationships and developing this program to come to this moment. This camp was truly the culmination of everything. But what I also realized was that this camp was not only the result of the project, but it was the greatest give back I could ever give to a community who has given me so much. Throughout the weekend and even weeks after the camp, families in Keiki would not stop talking about how monumental the camp was for their Ohanan community. But really, that was my thank you to them for giving me more than what I could have ever imagined from this project. What started off as a thesis project turned into a lifelong commitment to the community.
So I just want to thank you especially for doing this presentation, coming back, stacking it against another conference that you're presenting at, but for the work that you do. And I think showcasing for our students especially how their thesis project, while they may think of it as kind of one and done, actually yours turned into, you've got a whole lifetime of work, and it's really beautiful to see where it's gone. We have questions that might come in online. We'll start with the questions in person. You can just call on the people in person, and then I'll interrupt every once in a while and be like, oh, we've got a question online. So
hi online, sorry, I didn't acknowledge. Yes.
That was a great presentation. Do you feel like you've been able to bring like sort of that, you know, community culture into institutions like UH, and maybe advice on how we can sort of have two things?
Ooh, that's a good question. I gotta give it up to quite a few of these professors. I think NREM is really lucky to have people like Nehana and these guys that are like bringing that culture into the university. I understand it's hard because I think not a lot of professors or just university facilities are technically like super in-depth connected to communities that they work in. And we've seen results of that on larger issues with UH and stuff like that. So that's a hard one. I think it's just about, if the student has a passion, then I think the professors will follow, even if it might not be right off the bat, you know? But if you have, I think it has to be pursued individually to make those kind of changes, collectively as well. But that's a hard one. I don't know. I haven't been in UH2 in a while, so. But I'm sure it's grown. I don't know. I'm really sure it's grown a lot. I see a lot more projects. I get a lot more students that reach out and send their little proposal to us about introducing who they are, and they're already like, you can just feel it. There's like there's a shift that's happening where people want to be connected. They want to be invested and build relationships. They don't just want to be in and out. So I think it's a human thing, hopefully, that's changing. Sure, quiet.
So we don't have any coming in online, but I'll ask a question on behalf of the students. So it sounds like you had doors just open up that kind of led you to Hutton. But for many of these students who maybe either they're not from here or they're not familiar with projects they can do in their own communities, they may struggle to identify something the way you did. What's your advice for them?
Yeah, that's a good one. I always say if the places you're working at has community work days, that is probably the best place to start. Just because it's already open to the public. And when you go to those things, introduce yourself at the end, just get in, dive into the work, dive into the community work day, and then say, hey, my name is so-and-so, and my master's, I'm doing a project over here, and I just really want to get in. I just want to know more about you guys and get more involved. I would say that's one of the best ways. But I also realize not every place has a community work day. So my advice in that case would be, the community doesn't have, and that's the other hard thing too. Like I was really fortunate because, as you guys could see, this community was super established and had this nonprofit this nonprofit is kind of a really unicorn kind of nonprofit in the world, because they, like I said, they've been at the forefront of everything. They're so community driven on every aspect, from fisheries to taro farming to running Hutton State Park. So that made it really easy because they already gathered and there was a consistent group that met and you could just jump on and go with it. If they don't have community work days, I would encourage at least taking some time to Google online, and you can come across like the traditional place names of that place. There's always, like, you could even ask our Hawaiian Studies department. They will probably gladly show you to where you can find more, just like some historical information about the place. Because I realized too, when I did Quest, that scientific diver course when I was in the undergrad, and this limu that we were looking for through our Quest program, the teachers were like, do the monitoring survey. But I went on to some like historical interviews and at the site, and they listed all the limus that were there, and so I showed it to the teacher, like, is this the ones we should be looking for? So sometimes when you dive into historical things, you'll find maybe what used to be in that place, and maybe that'll actually help your research quite a bit. So yeah, if there's no people attached to it, I would at least dive into historical context of place, anything you can do, because you might find something super interesting, not only for your project, but just for yourself to connect. Okay.
So you said that you are born and raised in Mililani,
Yes.
and then you started working on this community-based project and started master degrees. So Mililani community, AENA communities, comparing what you have gone through, what similarities did you find and what were very different between the two?
Ooh, that's a good question. The community that I grew up in Mililani, I was a sports girl, so it was a very, like I always say, Mililani was wonderful in academics and academia, really great. So in that respect, having something that they're known for and really like pushing that, I would say is a similarity that the two have, even though it's two very different, like fishing and farming versus soccer and football and academics. But if you look at community values, they're all the same, you know, it's similar things. And I think, sorry, I'm not a psychology person, but I think there's like a few key things of life that you need. And one of them is sense of community. And so I think that that they have that in common. They're both just very different location wise. One is suburban, one is rural. And I also like I gotta thank a lot of this stuff to my parents too. Like I was born and raised from a teacher and a social work, and I found myself doing both in my career. Which is also another heads up is that from NREM to and I've learned that I've my degrees in marine science, and then I came here in natural resource and environmental management, and we all goof around about it, but it's so true. It's social work for natural resources. Because that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the resource and you're dealing with the people and that cross interface. So if you didn't know, welcome to the world you're stepping into, which is important because it's all about human relationships, I think. You can all talk to each other, human to human at the end of the day, issues aside. But yeah, totally different communities, but still very rich in what they're known for and what they hold, like big pride in Mililani, but sports related, and a big pride in their traditional lifestyle kind of thing. So I still bounce between both, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I know you mentioned that sometimes there were moments when maybe you and your committee didn't see eye to eye, or maybe it was just like a difference of with UH when you were going and not seeing like the community as involved with different projects. Did you ever encounter like lessons learned from like maybe not being on the same page with community? And if so, like how did you
Not being on the same page with community or committee?
community? Yeah, sorry.
On the same page with the community. Yes. I think too, as I dive deeper into the community, as you guys can see, like, I'm not saying too that this is the extent of what everybody should go through, because it's a lot, trust me. People were all the time like, what are you doing? But when I dive deeper into the community, I also started to get to know them on a family basis and in their family dynamics. That was really hard for me because I wouldn't agree with things on a family level, because I was like literally like annoyed by them. I was living with some of them, and so that was hard. There were times where I would hear them like kind of venting about the fisheries or things that they didn't like going on, or community members that they couldn't see eye to eye with, and I didn't agree. And I would respectfully like sit and listen. But when given the chance, I was always respectful, and I would just, always disclaimer, I'm not from here. Don't have to take my word for it, but I don't know. But I think there's a value to that, being neutral, not being from there. You can kind of hone into that special superpower too, because you're not connected on that level where you're born and raised from there and you know the dynamics, but you are involved enough, but can also step away and see bigger picture. And sometimes they need that. Like, sometimes I have people tell me, I don't know, maybe you were super successful in this project because you weren't from there, So it's something to think about too. It's not a bad thing to not be from the places you come from, because you never know if you bring a special tool or something that they just haven't had yet. But I also have seen and heard the flip side of the coin. It's also important to recognize if you don't belong in a community. you feel that right away, that's real too. And just to kind of sit with that and understand, maybe it's not you, maybe it's just the timing, maybe it's just, those kinds of things. So yeah, I don't know. I think that'd be my best way to answer that. That's a good question. Thank you. Did you have one? No.
Oh, yeah, sorry, no, you're looking over there. I just wanted to mahalo you for all of your experiences, sharing your personal journey and the whole level that came with all of that. I really appreciate it. My question is, I heard you're working with Keiki, so kind of along the line of Liz's question in terms of, is there any efforts to kind of breed the next generation of scientists coming from Haena?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I'm so sorry. I would have loved to expand. There's so many complex parts to my job and also like sharing this today. But that's our main focus. So we have all of our programs are during the intercession. So we have a spring program, a summer program for all ages. And then we just started this internship program for early high school, early college students. And a lot of our kids too, in my thesis, I talk about it, but a lot of the kids help develop our marine monitoring program. So we had a consistent group of 5th graders coming out while I was doing this project. They were the ones that were doing our OPE monitoring. We taught them the method and we showed the state too. We're like, hey, we got 5th graders to do our monitoring. It's possible. It's a lot of training. It's a lot of back checking their work. Like, you sure you counted that many? Let's count them again, like that kind of stuff. But when you're doing this kind of work too, you realize you got to use the resources that are around. And we wanted to engage the next generation. And even Uncle guys say it all the time. No sense we go for this whole community-based subsistence fishing or if the next generation isn't interested in it. Because uncles have worked so hard, 20+ years on this. And if they turn around and nobody else is ready to do it, then for what was all that work? And so we have a lot of youth that have showed up to our monitoring things. We've trained a lot of our youth in that. Some have gone on to degrees, some have continued to work with us. But it's a constant. We're just constantly pumping them out. And a lot of our programs in school too, we started with some from a very young age and they're kind of at elementary, middle school age now. So you're starting to see like what they're interested in. But another thing to note too is higher education is a little tricky in Haena because we're so far away. The closest high school to Haena is Kapaa High School and it's over an hour away. And so we lose a lot of kids in the education system on the North Shore because of all those factors. They're just not interested, it's a far commute. And so we hear all the time from the parents that our programs are the only school they want to go to. Because it's more of their life, it fits their lifestyle, it fits their upbringing. It's just more of those kind of kids. There are hands-on kids, they're the ones that want to do this kind of work. And so I think eventually we hope to be something a little bit more year-round to offer to those kids. But yeah, we're definitely like doing everything. I'm looking for a coworker as well to help me build education because that's what we need. More support capacity-wise on the teacher front so we can do more. But we have a very robust education program. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's fun too. If you can include kids in your project, that'll keep it fun. If you're into kids, if you're not, maybe not.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.